Question. It's been a few days since. Answer. Yeah. Question. Well, according to press, anyway, thousands of documents were stolen from the DCCC by hackers, and those documents were made available to Florida reporters and bloggers. Do you recall seeing this transpire sort of simultaneously? Answer. No, I don't recall anything about the DCCC outside of what I said in the months here that you're asking about at all. I was entirely too busy trying to make people have computers that work. Question. That makes sense. Prior to 2016, had you seen any breaches of networks on the scale of what ultimately transpired? Answer. Nothing on the scale of what ultimately transpired. We have seen phishing attacks that were successful, that compromised some credentials here or there. We had seen ransomware, which is sort of a malicious software that an adversary would install on your computer using an attachment to an email that would then be used to encrypt a file or folder or a drive, then ask you for money to decrypt it. We've had those kinds of activities happen, and we were able to deal with those specifically without having to pay the ransom. Question. The Unclassified Intelligence Community Assessment reports that Russian intelligence obtained and maintained access to elements of multiple U.S. state or local electoral boards. Do you recall in your role at the DNC becoming aware of concerns at the state or local level? Answer. I think I remember reading a news article in the fall of 2016 that had to do with state and local voting or election apparatus being targeted. I think one of the reports that the U.S. intelligence community released, maybe a statement, in October 2016 mentions that. But I do think that that same statement falls short of actually attributing those activities to the Russian government-sponsored efforts, at least at that time. And I think they may have released more information in December and January after that. Question. And you mentioned in your discussion with my colleagues earlier that I believe it was the second FBI request of you was to look into a series of email addresses. Answer. The second set of requests, yes. Question. And it sounds like you looked into those and discovered all of those were in a spam folder. Is that right? Answer. Spam filter. Question. A spam filter. Answer. Caught by a spam filter, all but one. Question. All but one? Okay. Answer. Yeah, all but one were caught by a spam filter, and the one that was not caught by a spam filter meant that it was delivered to the recipient's mailbox, but it was not opened by that individual. We confirmed that by looking at the logs. Question. That seems to indicate to me that your firewall worked pretty well at that point in time. Answer. Well, I wish. It doesn't indicate that. What it does indicate is that the spam filter, which is different than the firewall, worked really well. Question. Oh, okay. That shows my ignorance. The spam filter. Answer. Yes, right. Question. That was the spam filter. Answer. Yeah. Question. Interesting. Okay. What would the firewall catch? What types of things? Answer. So the firewall would have caught if there was an attachment, for instance, to one of those emails that was nefarious. Or it would have caught a link that was embedded in an email, potentially, that went to a site that was blacklisted, for instance. Or if that traffic, once the person clicked on the link, that sent them to a website that was nefarious, let's say, and that website triggered activity back to the DNC network, the firewall would have caught that, potentially. It's designed to. Question. So the spam filter is what caught these? Answer. Correct. Question. And that was in place before the firewall, I guess, or? Answer. Correct. Question. Okay. Answer. Yes. I mean, DNC at the time had more than one spam filter as well, but that's not important. Question. This is great because it's very educational for me. I would just ask you, Mr. Tamene, is there anything you think that we should know about what happened during the 2016 election that would assist in our investigation? This has been very helpful. Answer, yeah. I don't know if I have, sort of, any more useful information than the answers that I provided. I do think, and this may not be specific to the activity that pertained to 2016 that the DNC underwent with these attacks, but in general, I think that the U.S. intelligence community does quite a good job, a great job maybe even, in assessing and analyzing all of this information. There's a ton of it. Even just looking at the DNC itself, like I mentioned to you before, it's 15 gigs of data, which is a lot of data. And that doesn't include the actual emails, just information about emails, right? It's just metadata about emails. It's just a ton of it. And so imagine what that looks like for the entire U.S., corporations, universities, and all that stuff. I get that that's a lot. And so they do quite an amazing job in looking at all that stuff and figuring out bad things, that are happening. What I would like to see, I should say, is better sharing of information at the declassified level. I mean, they do that already. They have websites. They have maybe even seminars, that kind of stuff. But these are not readily available, easily digestible, well marketed. I would love to see, a small organization like the DNC, which has a really big profile, but it's a really small nonprofit organization, can use that kind of assistance from the U.S. intelligence community and others, potentially, right? Yeah, so I would love to see that kind of thing. Question. Is it your sense or your observation that the coordination between the DNC and perhaps other political organizations is better now than it was? Answer. I can't speak to that. I do know that I've had a couple of conversations, and, maybe Andrew Brown has had more. I think maybe he has, with other organizations, political organizations, around cybersecurity, but I don't know enough about that to say more. Question. Is it your sense that the DNC is better protected for elections going forward? And, for example, if these actors were to come back, or others, would you be able to detect them? Answer. That's a tough question, right? So saying yes is terrifying, and saying no is also terrifying, right? So one thing I want to say is that the business of cybersecurity, which I've now become really familiar with, is one, really it's sort of an arms race, right? So you have your adversaries getting smarter, evolving their tactics, and then you have organizations having to do the same to make sure that they're several steps ahead of the adversary's tactics, resources, mechanisms, right? And so I think if the question, and I know this isn't the exact question you're asking, but if the question is, given the systems, tools, practices in place today at the DNC, could the same types of nefarious activities or threat vectors employed by APT-28, APT-29 in 2015 and 2016, could those be successful today? The answer is no. But I guarantee you that APT-28 and APT-29 is not using those tools anymore. They're using other tools now, right? And so I do think that the DNC has, and continues to improve its cybersecurity posture. I do think that in 2 years, if you ask me that same question, I would give you a very similar answer, saying we are certain that we can probably stop the attacks of 2017 in 2019. But I don't know for a fact that we can stop 2019 attacks in 2019, right? And that's the trick, right? You have to be able to match them where they are and be better than them. And that's a continuing struggle that the DNC is investing in, has invested in, will continue to invest in. How do you invest in this question? How do you invest in this issue? Is there collaboration with your counterparts, with folks in other countries? Answer. Well, I can give you sort of concrete answers of things that have happened at the DNC, for instance, right? One of the things I mentioned before is that we improved our firewall in 2013. We improved it again in 2015, for instance, or 2016 is when it actually took effect. You have more frequent, more elaborate, more tricky, if you will, training sessions with your DNC users, your staff members on how to use computers in a secure fashion. You increase your communication with staff about, if you see something, say something, kind of encouragement. You use someone like CrowdStrike to sort of monitor your network 24/7. You do penetration testing, which the DNC has been doing in the past, continues to do, and will do in the future. You test your responses to incidents. So, one of my favorite things to talk about is, for instance, Netflix it's a big company. Netflix has what they call Chaos Monkey. What it actually does is goes around and turns off servers randomly to see if their systems are resilient enough to keep going, keep working. So the Chaos Monkey goes around and turns off 1 or 2 servers. They have a Chaos Gorilla, which turns off entire data centers to see if they can withstand it, which is crazy. I mean, the DNC is not doing that, but that's the kind of thing that the DNC has done. Not turning things off, but pretending like things are off and seeing what happens. Sort of like your login system is off. How do you know that the adversaries are doing things or not if there's adversaries on your systems? If the check engine light is off, for instance, how do you know, you're actually working in good shape or not, right? That's the kind of thing that we have to keep doing. We have been doing. We will continue to do. So yeah, I think looking at disaster repair, looking at incident response plans, looking at prevention tools like CrowdStrike's tool sets, antivirus, making sure that your systems are up to date with Windows or a Linux or a Mac operating system security patches and getting alerts when such patches are out of date. And, unfortunately, it includes mobile devices now because they're too smart to ignore, right? And so they can be hacked and used to be leveraged against your systems. Question. I think the DNC is in very good hands with you. Answer. Thank you. Blank. That's actually all the questions I have. Blank. Do you want to push on, or did you need a break? Mr. Wilson, want to just power through? Mr. Tamene, yeah. Mr. Wilson, let's do it, if everybody's all right with that. Blank, thanks again. My name is blank with the majority. I just want to ask brief questions about, basically, DNC, CrowdStrike, and the FBI. Mr. Tamene, sure. By blank. Question. I think you said that, well, when was CrowdStrike brought on by the DNC? Answer. So the first conversation I had with CrowdStrike was a Sunday. I want to say May 1st. Sunday, May 1st, 2016. That doesn't mean that the DNC didn't work with CrowdStrike beforehand. I don't know what they did, but my engagement relative to the APT-28, APT-29 activities was Sunday, May 1st. Question, yes, and thanks. And we're just going to discuss as it relates to what we've been talking about here. So when CrowdStrike was brought on, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said CrowdStrike made the decisions over which servers to mirror, copy, slash. Answer, correct, clone. Question, clone, thank you. They did that based upon their expertise. Answer, right. Question, right. So they didn't copy all the servers that the DNC has, right? Answer, correct. I want to stress here, the DNC has many, many servers, hundreds, and we looked at all of them in terms of nefarious activity of any kind, not just limited to APT-28 or APT-29. I want to stress that. And in our investigation led by CrowdStrike, but not limited to CrowdStrike's experts, I mean, my team was involved in assisting with those efforts. CrowdStrike's toolsets found, and we found evidence of compromise. And again, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact number. I want to say 38 systems. Some of those systems were laptops, for instance, right. And I think one or two of them were interesting enough for us to clone them to see if they had any forensic value. Now, this is going beyond my level of expertise here. I know a little bit about what forensic analysis looks like, but I don't know enough to speak to that. Question. That's okay. Answer. Now, in terms of what threshold or what criteria CrowdStrike used to determine which of the 38 needed cloning, I can't speak to that with any authority. Question. Sure. Answer. But I do think that what they were looking at, my understanding, at the very least, was if we could find, in looking further into historic logs, meaning things that happened in the past, instead of things that are happening. Once you take an image of the thing, it's no longer logged. Like the image is not mirrored after you copy it. So like looking at past evidence of activity that they can confirm scope, nature, and various types of activities used by the adversaries. Question. So once CrowdStrike made the determination, with your assistance, you guys working together, and forget the technical jargon because I'm not going to get it, right? Answer, sure. Question, but whatever servers and systems were copied, mirrored, cloned, that material was given over to the FBI. Answer, my understanding is yes. I don't know if all of it was given. Question, okay. Answer, but I do know that whatever the FBI asked for, and I know this from having another few text messages with the agent at the FBI, that whatever they asked for, they had received from CrowdStrike. Question, okay, so I just want to, so there may be some stuff that CrowdStrike copied, mirrored, clone that wasn't given to the FBI? You just don't know. Answer: I mean, CrowdStrike didn't do any copying and mirroring. We did. Question: you did. Answer: yeah, provided those to CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike may not have given all the things to the FBI, but it doesn't mean that they withheld anything from the FBI. Question: sure. Answer: I want to make sure that that's really important. Question: no, I understand that. Who at CrowdStrike would have that answer? Answer: well, I mean, I spoke with Robert Johnson, the project manager assigned to the DNC. I spoke with others since then, but I think the FBI agent that I spoke with was speaking directly, I believe, with Robert Johnson. Question: and who is the FBI agent you were talking to? Answer: the FBI agent, so I call him, name removed, Special Agent, that's blanked out. His first name, I think, is, and that's blanked out. Question: and so CrowdStrike is brought on or about May 1st, 2016. The DNC's first contacts with the FBI in relation to what we're discussing here were about when? Answer: say that, I'm sorry. Question: so CrowdStrike was brought on or about May 1st, 2016 for everything we're talking about here. Answer: correct. Question: when was the DNC's first contact with the FBI in regards to what we're discussing here? Answer: September 2015 is the first phone call that I received. Mr. Elias: I think he means in May, right? Blank. Right. Blank. Yeah, just so we're clear, you engaged CrowdStrike after. You discovered. Mr. Tamene: evidence. Blank. Evidence. Mr. Tamene: right. Correct. Blank. Not because of the FBI contacting them. Mr. Tamene: correct. Mr. Elias: no, but I think his question is, you were talking to CrowdStrike then. When is the first contact with the FBI subsequent to that? Blank. Right. Exactly. Mr. Tamene: subsequently to CrowdStrike being engaged? Blank. Yes. Mr. Tamene: so, I mean, I wasn't on the phone with CrowdStrike and the FBI at the same time, but I did get a text message, again, from agent, blanked out, from the FBI, blank, after he finished his triathlon. Mr. Tamene: well, I mean, I think he was done on Monday or Sunday. It was like some blank thing is what he called it. I don't know. And Mr. Elias: I don't think that's a triathlon. Mr. Tamene: I don't know what it is. But anyway, so Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. So May 3rd or 4th is when agent, blanked out, confirmed that he had reached out to Robert Johnson. They had spoken. And Robert Johnson confirmed that as well on the phone. I mean, I had a 9 a.m. phone call with Robert Johnson every day for, 2 months. So one of the things that we discussed was his engagement with agent, blanked out, and their progress, if you will. By blank. Question: and so, between the FBI and CrowdStrike, did the FBI ever make a request of the DNC to have full access themselves? Answer: no, that did not. That never happened. I think agent, blanked out, would have asked for that if he needed it. I had a good relationship. Agent blank still do. I spoke with him last maybe 3 weeks ago, again, texting, but also a phone call as well. And there's no reason to think that he was sort of shying away from asking something. Question, sure. I'm just trying to figure out if the FBI ever, either agent blank or otherwise. Answer, sure. Question, ask the DNC for full access to everything. Answer, agent blank or any other agent never asked me, and I have no reason to think they asked the DNC other personnel about this. Question, okay. And internally at some point, the DNC, did they make a decision to utilize CrowdStrike services versus turning the whole thing over to the FBI? Is that a conversation you all had? Answer, I didn't. Mr. Elias, what do you mean by turning the whole thing over to the FBI? Blank. Well, if there was there was an initial contact with the FBI in September of 2015, and then again in the coming months of early 2016, right? And obviously there was something afoot. Some bad, nefarious activity was going on. Mr. Tamene, sure, blank. So certain individuals would turn to law enforcement, other individuals would turn to private sector individuals. So I'm trying to figure out. Mr. Elias, but with all due respect, the FBI doesn't remediate your problem. Blank. No, I get it. I'm asking. Mr. Elias, so it's not an either or. Blank. I believe they say CrowdStrike also sort of helped rebuild some of those systems. This is not something you would. Blank. I know, but I'm asking him. Mr. Tamene, yeah, no, I think if I knew, which I didn't, and I still don't, knew that the FBI offered comparable, similar type of services that CrowdStrike offered, sure, I would have probably considered them as a resource. That was not known to me, is still not known to me, that they offer those kind of services. The kind of services or the kind of support that Agent Blank had provided thus far was sort of, hey, maybe there's something going on here. You should take a look at it. One thing in addition to that he did is send a script to run on our systems to see if we could find some activity. And that was in April, I think, of 2016. And we ran that script, or a modified version of that script, in May. And I'm really glad we didn't run the script he sent us in April, because if we had, we would have been discovered immediately by the adversaries. I'm not saying that's him being incompetent. He was giving me a sample. Question. No. And I'm not saying the FBI is the problem solver of the world. Blank. Well, let me try again with an analogy, which is, if your house is, in the physical world, if your house is broken into, ransacked, a sort of analogous, noisy activity to what you discovered on your systems on April 28th, at the end of the day, it's not going to be the police who's going to help you get your stuff back and inventory everything. You're going to call the insurance company. Mr. Tamene, sure. Blank. But in that situation, most people's first call would be to law enforcement. Come. Mr. Tamene, right. Blank. Collect evidence, take pictures, so on and so forth, and then you get on with whatever private sector engagements. Now, I'm not saying it's a perfect parallel, but I think the question he was asking is, when you discovered this noisy activity on April 28th, understanding, blank, to be clear, the noisy activity, he did not know it to be a burglar, in your example, at the time. Blank and blank. We don't interrupt you when you ask questions, so please allow us the same courtesy. Blank. When you discovered this noisy activity that you thought, weren't certain, but, strongly thought was, anomalous. Unauthorized activity on your systems. Was there a discussion of bringing in law enforcement to directly look at what had happened? See what you had seen. Call the FBI into your office, sort of like you would call the police after a burglary. Mr. Tamene: So I did. I mean, my text message to the agent. Agent blank of the FBI on Friday, April 29th, yes, was saying, quote, "Hey, I think we found some evidence that suggests nefarious activity on our network. Do take a look at the logs that I sent you," unquote. My hope was that the log that I sent him would corroborate the evidence that we found. Turns out that it didn't, but that was one of the things that I was hoping for. And he was, gracious and responsive, even though he was, doing whatever he was doing. He said, quote, "Let me know if you need any help over the weekend," unquote. And, by the time, the following day was Saturday, we had phone calls with, like I mentioned before, with folks who knew what they were talking about in the cybersecurity space, and then again on Sunday when CrowdStrike was brought in. And by then, the kinds of expertise that I was getting, that the DNC was going to get by Monday was, sufficient, right? My fear level, which was a 10 starting Thursday, maybe went down to a 9, maybe 9.5 at that point, because I knew that I had the support that I needed, the DNC needed at that time. And that was further, I want to say, supported by Agent Blank response after he spoke with Robert Johnson at CrowdStrike to say you're in good hands. I think if Agent Blank had said you're not in good hands, which he could have said, I would have freaked out, and I would have talked to DNC leadership and saying, "We don't have the right people on the job here. Agent Blank is telling me something different," unquote, right? But he didn't. He did the opposite of that. He confirmed my feelings or my belief that we were in good hands. By Blank. Question. And then my last question before Blank has a couple more is, do you know how much the DNC pay CrowdStrike for their services in relation to this? Answer. I don't know, actually. That wasn't part of my budget. Question. No, sure. Do you know who would know over there? Answer. Well, I am pretty sure I don't know. I mean, the two people that I'm pretty sure would know are probably the CFO at the time and the COO who wrote the check, right? I mean, the people who signed it, presumably they would know. Question. They were? Sorry, I don't know their names. Answer. Oh, I mentioned the COO's name. Chief Operating Officer's name at the time was Lindsay Reynolds. And when would the check have been written? I don't know when the check was written. So we've had 3 CFOs in the past year. One of them is named Brad Marshall, the first one, and then another one is named Charles Olivier. And the third one, currently one, is named Joe. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, I'm sorry. Question, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Blank. Just one question in the 1.5 minutes I have left. There's a New York Times article in December 2012 that goes through most of the timeline we have talked about today, which repeatedly references and includes a Snapchat of a memo that it was reported that you wrote. Can you just briefly describe the circumstances under which this memo came about? When? Why? What's in there besides what's? Mr. Elias. I'm sorry, what is the memo? Blank. It seems to be a memo recounting at some point in the future, or at some point in April 2016 or subsequent, the engagements that Mr. Tamene had with the FBI beginning in December 2015. Mr. Elias, and how did the Times get it? Do you know? Blank. They said it was a memo that's been obtained by the Times. Blank. I don't know what memo. Mr. Wilson, this is actually a memo that was created at the request of counsel. So I think that we can have another conversation separately about getting further into that. But I think there's some privilege issues there we need to sort out. Blank. Okay, I think that's our time. Blank. I don't have any further questions. I think that concludes the interview. Blank. Thank you. Thanks. Whereupon at 3:44 p.m., the interview was concluded.